He threw the wildest parties money could buy, dated some of the world's biggest pop stars, produced era-defining albums, and built a billion-dollar brand while dancing across stages like nothing could touch him. For decades, Sean Diddy Combs was untouchable, the king of New York nightlife, hip-hop royalty, and the ultimate image of success in the music industry. But while the world applauded his every move, something darker was happening behind the scenes. And now, the curtain's been ripped wide open. Once known for red carpets and champagne showers, Diddy is now sitting in a federal prison serving a 50-month sentence after being found guilty in a disturbing criminal case involving coercion and abuse. But believe it or not, that's not why his name is back in the headlines. Because just weeks ago, new sexual assault allegations surfaced, this time from a male music producer, accusing Diddy of an encounter that allegedly happened in 2020. And it doesn't stop there. According to reports, Diddy's own protege, the son of the Notorious B.I.G. CJ Wallace, is accused of helping set it up. Yeah, Biggie's son is now part of this story. A deleted Instagram post, an official police report, a counter-lawsuit, and investigators from Los Angeles to Florida digging into one of music's most guarded inner circles, all painting a picture that's darker and way more complicated than anyone could have guessed. So what actually happened? How much of it is true? And how did one of the most powerful moguls in the game go from Forbes lists to courtrooms and concrete walls? This isn't just another fall from grace, it's a cultural reckoning happening in real time. And trust me, you're going to want to see how deep this story really goes. Long before the lawsuits, the headlines, and the prison sentence, Sean Combs was the ultimate rags-to-riches story in hip-hop. He wasn't born into fame, didn't he arrive through a viral hit. He fought tooth and nail for every inch of his success. It all started in the early 90s when a young, relentless Combs hustled his way into an unpaid internship at Uptown Records. Even then, his presence was electric, part business instinct, part chaos engine. It wasn't long before he was executive producing hits for artists like Mary J. Blige and Jodeci, pushing a new kind of R&B that blurred lines between street soul and Polish. But Combs wasn't built to follow someone else's rules. After clashing with Uptown's execs, he was fired. And just like that, a music empire was born. In 1993, he launched Bad Boy Entertainment, and everything changed. From day one, Bad Boy wasn't just a label, it was a lifestyle brand hidden inside a record company. His first breakout star, a Brooklyn rapper named Christopher Wallace, better known as the Notorious B.I.G., and when Biggie hit, it wasn't a ripple, it was a cultural earthquake. Platinum plaques, award show dominance, New York pride at an all-time high. Diddy wasn't behind the scenes anymore, he was dancing in the videos, flashing diamonds, ad-libbing all over the tracks with his now signature take that. As the money rolled in, so did the power moves. He signed artists like Maze, 112, Faith Evans, and The Lox, creating a whole generation of hits that defined late 90s hip-hop. But Combs wasn't stopping at music. By 1998, he launched Sean John, a luxury streetwear brand that became one of the first rap-driven fashion lines to hit mainstream retail. And he didn't stop there, he bought into brands like CROC, Vodka, flipping it into a $100 million partnership, and started producing films, owning TV networks, launching digital platforms. He was everywhere, award shows, reality TV, Forbes lists. One year he even beat Jay-Z as the richest man in hip-hop. This wasn't just a rapper collecting checks, he became a global symbol of success, opulence and power, and for years, nobody questioned it. To the public, it looked like he mastered the formula: talent, hustle, and relentless ambition. But some say he mastered something else entirely: how to weaponize power behind closed doors, because while fans were chasing his blueprint, others were being silenced, and that power was about to turn against him. At the peak of his fame, Sean Diddy Combs seemed untouchable, a mogul with the Midas touch. But the truth, the whispers had already started decades ago. They weren't front-page headlines. They never made TMZ's breaking news. But if you looked closely, the signs were always there. Back in the early 2000s, an assistant on his team mysteriously disappeared from the label. No public statement, no interviews. Years later, a cryptic tweet surfaced hinting at being forced to sign papers and forget things. No names, no lawsuit. Just one of many stories that quietly vanished in shadows. There were NDAs, a lot of them, former collaborators, dancers, hairstylists. Security occasionally dropped vague warnings in interviews and podcasts. One choreographer said, "I've seen things I'll never repeat." Another background singer alluded to being at parties where choices had to be made, but never said more. Why? Because the price of telling the truth in Combs' orbit was often career suicide. Then came the rumored settlements, unconfirmed, sealed, or paid off before ever reaching public courtrooms. Deals made behind the scenes, hushed phone calls, and silence primed with six-figure checks. In an industry where reputation builds empires, no one wanted to go head-to-head with Bad Boy's boss. And so, for most of his reign, Diddy didn't just enjoy success, he controlled the narrative. But something changed over time. The culture shifted. The music world began openly confronting abuse, manipulation, and toxic power dynamics. Movements like #MeToo cracked open stories once buried beneath fame and fear. And many wondered how had someone like Diddy gone untouched for so long. Still, even then, no one in power said a word. The whispers stayed whispers. Until one voice broke through and named the world already knew, but a truth they never expected, because everything finally changed the moment Cassie Ventura came forward. Her lawsuit wouldn't just open the floodgates, it would tear down Diddy's wall of silence. And what followed, no one saw coming. For years, they looked like one of hip-hop's fairy tale couples, if fairy tales came with red carpets, award show kisses, and jet-set vacations. Cassie Ventura, a rising R&B singer, was one of Sean Diddy Combs' most visible partners throughout the late 2000s. She was signed to his label, he promoted her music. They were side by side at fashion shows, NBA games, and luxury getaways. From the outside it looked glamorous, motivational, picture perfect. But in November 2023, Cassie shattered that illusion and shook the entire entertainment world. She filed a stunning civil lawsuit against Combs, pulling back the curtain on what she described as nearly a decade of mental manipulation, extreme control, and physical abuse. In the lawsuit, Cassie alleged that Diddy didn't just control her music career, he controlled her entire life. According to the filings, she described being forced into sexual acts with male escorts, supplied with substances that altered her mental state, and subjected to violent assaults when she tried to resist. The most disturbing part, she claimed that Combs trafficked her to others for his own gain, disguising it as entertainment while using his power to isolate and intimidate her. This wasn't a vague accusation. It was meticulously detailed, naming places, dates, even hotel encounters, creating a chilling roadmap of control that had allegedly gone on for years. And unlike other rumors in the past, this one had receipts. The public reaction, immediate and explosive. Because suddenly, this wasn't some behind-the-scenes gossip. It was a woman millions had watched slowly fade from the music scene, now accusing one of hip-hop's biggest icons of abusing his power in the darkest ways imaginable. And here's where it got even more intense. Less than 24 hours after the lawsuit was filed, it was quietly settled. No trial, no statements, just a swift financial agreement, and Cassie walked away. To some, the settlement felt like silence money. To others, it confirmed something bigger was going on and Diddy didn't want it seen in court. Either way, it had a seismic effect. Cassie's story gave other victims the courage to speak out. Within weeks, the lawsuits started piling up, and what started as one woman's testimony was about to become a full-on legal avalanche, threatening to wipe away everything Diddy had spent decades building. Cassie lit the match, but what happened next was like watching a dam collapse in real time. In the weeks following her lawsuit and rapid settlement, new civil suits against Sean Diddy Combs began flooding courtrooms across the country. Women and men, some anonymous, some known, came forward with harrowing stories, many eerily similar in tone, location, and power dynamics. On November 27, 2023, a woman identified only as Jane Doe filed a lawsuit in New York alleging that Combs lured her to a music video shoot in 1991 when she was just 17, and then sexually assaulted her in the back room of a hotel. But that was only the start. Another anonymous woman claimed that Diddy, along with other industry figures, routinely hosted executive parties where guests were drugged, coerced, and filmed without consent. In court filings, she described Combs as a predator disguised as a producer, who used fame not just for access, but for control. These weren't vague accusations pulled from rumor mills. They were detailed, legally documented, and in some cases, supported by witnesses willing to testify under oath. By early 2024, at least 5 civil lawsuits had landed on Combs' legal doorstep, all painting a chilling picture of behavior that spanned decades. Some cases stemmed from the golden years of Bad Boy Records, while others traced back to recent parties during the pandemic, when his celebrity image was still glittering in public. But privately, the environment was getting darker. And again, patterns began emerging. The same luxury hotels, Los Angeles, Miami, New York, the same kinds of events, late-night gatherings disguised as business meetings. The same claims, intimidation, isolation, forced encounters, and, in some cases, filming without consent. Then came the twist that cracked the entire narrative wide open. In mid-2024, one of the anonymous plaintiffs, a music producer who had filed under the name John Doe, reportedly unmasked himself in a now-deleted Instagram post. He claimed Diddy assaulted him in February 2020, and again 1 year later. With help from another major figure, CJ Wallace, the son of the late Notorious B.I.G, it was the first male victim to publicly speak up, and it shifted the conversation overnight. This wasn't just one or two isolated incidents. It was beginning to feel systematic, coordinated, predatory, a story far bigger than anyone expected. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about celebrity scandal, it was starting to resemble something dangerously close to a criminal empire. For all the lawsuits, headlines and whispers over the years, Sean Diddy Combs had never been convicted of a single crime. Lawsuits, settled, accusations, denied, alleged victims, silenced. There was always a buffer, always a way out. Until now. In July 2024, that streak ended, and for the first time in his decades-long career, Diddy was found guilty in federal court. The charges, 2 felony counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, linked directly to the allegations made by Cassie Ventura and a second woman known only as Jane Doe No. 3 in court documents. According to prosecutors, the evidence revealed a disturbing pattern. Combs used private jets to transport women across state lines, allegedly for what were framed as industry networking events, but were revealed in court to involve coercion, manipulation, and non-consensual sexual activity. Arranged and controlled by Combs himself, this wasn't just a messy celebrity trial over lifestyle scandals. It was a federal trafficking case, handled by the U.S. Department of Justice and supported by sealed witness testimony, financial records, flight logs, and private communications subpoenaed from Combs' inner circle. Even for critics who had long suspected shady behavior, that guilty verdict was a jarring turning point, because suddenly, this wasn't about reputation anymore. This was prison time. In October 2024, the sentence came down. 50 months behind bars, over 4 years in a federal correctional facility, specifically FCI Fort Dix in New Jersey, and yet, despite the magnitude of the conviction, mainstream media barely blinked. Yes, the court ruling made it to headlines, but no major outlets ran in-depth features, no breaking news specials, no award show commentaries. The response? Muted, carefully worded, quiet. It was the TikTok creators, independent reporters, and fan podcasts who amplified what the networks wouldn't say out loud. On social media, viral clips broke down legal filings. Charts of Diddy's known associates began circulating. Hashtags like #SurvivingDiddy trended. But Hollywood, the music industry, silent. No statements from artists who had worked with him. No reactions from big-name collaborators. Even former friends and label mates avoided the topic entirely, as if the whole scandal was untouchable. Maybe it was fear, maybe loyalty, maybe guilt. But whatever the reason, something about this conviction felt like new territory, not just for Diddy, but for the entire entertainment world. For once, power wasn't enough to protect him, but while Diddy sat behind bars, serving out his time, the real storm was still building. Because just a few weeks later, Combs would be hit with another wave of accusations, and this time, the investigation was criminal, high-profile, and ongoing. For years, Diddy danced between allegations and acclaim, stacking Grammy wins and Forbes mentions while whispers of abuse stayed buried in settlements and sealed documents. But in July 2024, something changed. For the first time in his long and untouchable career, Sean Diddy Combs was found guilty. In federal court, the charges: 2 felony counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, a direct tie to explosive claims made by Cassie Ventura, and another woman identified only as Jane Doe in filed documents. What began as civil allegations had quietly escalated behind the scenes. Prosecutors had been collecting deeper evidence: flight logs, bank transfers, encrypted communications, and sealed testimony. At the center of it all were multiple trips, where, according to federal investigators, Combs arranged for women to be flown across state lines for what he described as professional appearances and industry events. In reality, these trips allegedly involved forced sexual encounters, manipulated power dynamics, and intimidation tactics to keep the women silent. This wasn't tabloid talk anymore. It wasn't social media speculation or lawsuit rumors. It was criminal trafficking in the eyes of the US government, and even Diddy's fiercest defenders knew. This time, there was no walking away. When the sentence was handed down in October 2024 to 50 months in a federal correctional facility, the hip-hop world froze. Over 4 years in prison. Not house arrest, not probation, real time, in real cement cells. Diddy was transferred to Fort Dix Federal Correctional Institution in New Jersey, an over 2,000 inmate facility known for holding white-collar criminals alongside long-term offenders. And yet, despite the magnitude of what just happened, the response was eerily quiet. You didn't see breaking headlines splashed across every network. There were no nightly panels unpacking what it meant for the music industry. No viral statements from former collaborators. No apologies. No reckoning. Some low-key blogs covered it. TikTok exploded with explainers. True crime YouTubers began digging in. But mainstream media, crickets. This was a billionaire mogul, once the face of modern black success, just convicted of criminally transporting women across state lines for exploitation. And yet, it felt like most of the industry didn't want to touch it. Maybe it was fear, maybe legal pressure, maybe a last gasp of gatekeeping from a vanishing era. But one thing was clear, Diddy's empire was indeed just cracked. It was collapsing. And while headlines cooled down for a moment, the storm was far from over. Because just as the world began adjusting to the idea of Diddy, the felon, a new report surfaced, and this time the accusations came from someone no one expected. Just when the world thought the headlines couldn't get any darker, a new figure stepped forward. But this time, it wasn't a former girlfriend, or a background dancer. It was a man. In September 2024, authorities in Largo, Florida received a detailed assault report from a man who alleged that Sean Diddy Combs sexually assaulted him back in 2020. The incident, according to the report, took place during one of Diddy's private gatherings, an event that the accuser now claims was a front for carefully orchestrated exploitation. The reporting didn't stop in Florida. Weeks later, officials confirmed that the case had been forwarded to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, where it's now being investigated by their Special Victims Bureau. And that single move made something very clear. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. It's criminal, active, and still unfolding. Digging deeper, an even more disturbing layer came to light. The man who filed the report is believed to be John Doe from a 2023 civil lawsuit, filed quietly months after Cassie's case. In a now-deleted Instagram post, the alleged victim appeared to publicly identify himself, calling out the music industry, hinting at collaborators who knew everything, and declaring he wouldn't stay silent any longer. Before the post disappeared, screenshots spread like wildfire across social media, and once again, journalists and internet sleuths connected the dots. According to the report obtained by ABC News, the man not only accused Diddy of violently assaulting him in February 2020, but also claimed that in March 2021, he was taken to the assault location by none other than CJ Wallace, the son of the Notorious B.I.G, Diddy's late best friend and most iconic collaborator. Wallace has denied the allegations completely and quickly filed a counterclaim in Florida, calling them wildly false and defamatory, and accusing the alleged victim of mounting a calculated smear campaign to damage both his and Combs' reputations. His legal team insists he had absolutely no involvement in any wrongdoing. Still, the damage was done, because with this accusation, the narrative changed again, and this time, in a way nobody expected. For the first time, the allegations weren't just coming from women. They weren't just vague, past-tense horror stories. They were current, criminal, and coming from men inside the industry. This wasn't just about abuse of women in private relationships anymore. It was revealing something broader, more calculated, and potentially more dangerous. If even Biggie's own son was being pulled into the scandal, what else was still buried? And if Diddy had hidden all of this for years, who else helped him keep it that way? What started as a case about power and control was beginning to look like the outer edge of something much more organized. If there's one name in hip-hop that still commands universal respect, it's the Notorious B.I.G, but now his son CJ Wallace has suddenly found himself pulled into the darkest scandal in hip-hop history. According to the report filed with Florida authorities and now under investigation by the Los Angeles Sheriff, apartment. The male victim accuses CJ Wallace of delivering him to a location in March 2021 where Diddy then assaulted him. The implication that CJ knowingly assisted in setting up the situation for Diddy. The accusation was already explosive, but for CJ it set off a cultural shockwave, because this isn't just any associate. This is Biggie's only son, the heir to one of rap's most sacred legacies, a kid who grew up in the spotlight, born into pain and idolized by fans as the bridge between two iconic eras. A kid who, for years, was positioned under Diddy's wing as a protege, someone the bad boy CEO claimed to protect like his own. And now, his name is in the same police report as a man who says he was trafficked and assaulted, allegedly with CJ's help. Wallace immediately fired back with a forceful counterclaim in Florida court. In it, he denied every allegation, called the claims wildly false and defamatory, and accused the accuser of orchestrating a calculated smear campaign targeting both him and Combs. His legal team described the lawsuit as desperate, dishonest, and designed to destroy reputations without evidence, but public reaction has been anything but clear-cut. Some fans rushed to defend him. After all, CJ's kept a mostly low profile, focusing on acting roles, cannabis ventures, and preserving his father's legacy. To them, it felt like an ambush, a way to weaponize CJ's name to stir media chaos or force a larger payout. Others, they weren't so sure. Online forums erupted with clips, old interviews, and grainy photos of CJ at various Diddy-hosted events trying to piece together timelines, circles, and blurred connections. Some began to ask, was CJ a victim of proximity, or a piece of something deeper? Because, if this allegation sticks, even partly, it doesn't just implicate Diddy, it drags hip-hop's most sacred bloodline into the fray. It throws the legacy of Biggie himself into question, not because of what he did, but because of the choices made by those who carried his name forward. This isn't about an artist screwing up or a mogul falling from grace anymore. It's about a story so tangled in fame, legacy, and silence, that no one's sure where loyalty ends and accountability begins. And with Wallace now publicly denying the claims, preparing legal retaliation, and tied directly into a broader active investigation, this story isn't just controversial, it's radioactive. Because when the son of Biggie Smalls gets pulled into a scandal involving Diddy, it threatens to shake the very roots of hip-hop's royal family, from the inside out. For over 3 decades, Sean Diddy Combs lived like royalty, private jets, penthouses, all-access passes to the industry he helped shape. But now that billion-dollar lifestyle has been reduced to a cold concrete cell surrounded by fences and federally mandated silence. Welcome to Fort Dix Federal Correctional Institution, the new home of one of hip-hop's most iconic figures. Located in New Jersey, Fort Dix is a low-security men's prison run by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. While it's not as intense as maximum security facilities, it's no resort either. Inmates live in barrack-style housing, follow strict routines, and grind through job assignments, educational programs, and constant surveillance. No VIP treatment here. Diddy, once surrounded by entourages and flashing lights, now wakes up to metal bunk beds, prison uniforms, cafeteria food, and mandatory headcounts. Sources say that since his arrival in October 2024, he's maintained a low profile. No major incidents reported, but no privileges beyond what the law allows. And while his physical world has shrunk, the legal war outside those prison walls hasn't stopped, not even for a moment. From inside Fort Dix, reports confirm Diddy's legal team is still fiercely active, submitting motions, preparing responses, and trying to manage the growing number of civil suits, investigations, and PR disasters stacking up against him. It's a full-time operation. But this time, he's not in control. Meanwhile, the music world is stuck in an uncomfortable standoff. Some longtime collaborators have quietly scrubbed him from press mentions and promo posts. Others, especially label affiliates, producers, and business partners, are reportedly keeping silent, waiting to see whether more shoe-dropping moments are ahead. Because right now, no one wants to be the one to defend him or be caught distancing too late. Diddy's music still gets streamed. His old hits haven't vanished from platforms, but the bad boy legacy is in limbo. Executives behind the scenes are likely holding tense meetings about what to do with royalty payments, unreleased projects, and brand deals he once proudly led. It's a strange kind of exile, not a fall so much as a freeze. The empire hasn't disappeared, but it's stuck in place, unable to move forward with its creator locked behind bars, and its foundation cracking under constant pressure. And as the world sits in silence, waiting for artists and insiders to speak up, Federal investigators, civil lawyers, and prosecutors aren't resting. They're digging, interviewing, preparing, because while Diddy's stuck in a cell 24 hours a day, back in the real world, the investigation is heating up fast. As the lawsuits multiply, the charges grow more serious. And the headlines refuse to fade. There's one voice still trying to hold the line: Diddy's legal team. In multiple statements to the press, his attorney Jonathan Davis has labeled the accusations as part of a media circus fueled by opportunists and social media hysteria. He's insisted repeatedly that Combs categorically denies all claims that he sexually abused anyone, calling the allegations false, defamatory, and impossible to address one by one in the face of an orchestrated pylon. In other words, the official stance is simple: this is a smear campaign, not a reckoning. But outside the courtroom, the public's no longer buying it. Each new legal filing, each police report, deleted post, or victim statement chips away at the carefully polished image Diddy spent decades building. Where once he was hailed as the mogul who broke boundaries and changed the sound of music, he's now trending online for entirely different reasons. #surviving Diddy, Puff Predator, the bad and bad boy. And here's what makes this moment different. For years, stories like these got swept under the rug, whispered about in hotel lobbies, ignored by mainstream outlets, forgotten once the next single dropped. But now, fans and followers are doing their own investigations. Young audiences, the very ones who once saw Diddy as living proof that hustle equals success, are digging into his past, connecting dots, and calling out the imbalance between money and accountability. The question isn't just, is he guilty, anymore. It's bigger. How did this go on for so long, and who helped hide it? A growing chorus on social media says what traditional media still won't. This isn't just an isolated fall from grace. It's what happens when powerful men spend decades protected by silence. Meanwhile, legal experts are warning that Combs' team may not be able to dismiss future cases so easily. Too many claims, too much detail, and a public that's no longer distracted by platinum records or red carpet appearances. It's not just the lawsuits piling up, it's the cultural weight behind them. Some say it's cancel culture, others, justice finally catching up. But one thing is clear: with active investigations, ongoing lawsuits, and victims gaining a louder voice with each passing week, Sean Combs may be running out of time, and running out of options. At this point, it's no longer just about headlines and lawsuits, it's about legacy. If even half of the allegations against Sean Diddy Combs are proven true, especially the recent claims involving male victims, coordinated abuse, and high-profile enablers, this won't just be one man's downfall, it will be one of the most devastating collapses in music history. Think about it. Diddy didn't just produce hits, he shaped the culture. He launched careers, owned fashion runways, graced Forbes covers, built brands like Bad Boy, Revolt, CROC, and Sean John into global powerhouses. He stood beside presidential figures, rewrote the business playbook for hip-hop, and inspired a generation of artists, moguls, and dreamers. He wasn't a background character, he was the blueprint. But now, that blueprint is torn, and if these allegations are officially confirmed, especially by entities as serious as the Department of Justice, multiple state authorities, and first-hand testimonies under oath, Combs won't just go down as a man who abused his power. He becomes the cautionary tale. The industry's inability or unwillingness to confront these behaviors sooner would become part of the story. The NDAs, the silence, the clout chasing, the unchecked loyalty, all of it would come under fire. For fans, it presents a painful question. How do you mourn an artist's legacy when the person behind it may have inflicted so much harm? Will his music still be streamed? Will future generations still dance to Mo Money, Mo Problems? Or will the name Diddy sit next to those fallen icons whose genius now comes packaged with warnings? And beyond culture, what happens to his empire? His publishing catalog, media assets, and brand holdings could be tied up in lawsuits for years. Collaborators and former business partners may be forced to publicly sever connections to avoid backlash. Bad Boy Entertainment, once a beacon of hip-hop royalty, may never recover from the stain. All of it could be suspended in limbo, too profitable to abandon but too toxic to touch. There was a time when Diddy represented the dream, a black entrepreneur mastering the game, becoming the boss, and taking his people with him. But now he's alone, behind bars, under investigation, facing lawsuits from every direction, his silence only growing louder, as the world waits for something he may never deliver. The truth. In the end, whether the system holds him criminally accountable or not, one thing is already certain: The empire Diddy built took decades to rise. It took less than a year to bring it all crashing down.